It started with a strange light in the sky, soft at first, like a second sunrise that refused to fade. People stopped in the streets, phones raised, trying to capture what no one could explain. Within hours, the world's news networks went silent on regular programming. Every screen, from city billboards to tiny kitchen TVs, flickered and showed the same thing: a figure surrounded by a calm blue glow. The voice that followed wasn't loud or threatening. It was measured, almost kind, carrying the weight of something older than time itself. "People of Earth," it said, "your planet is in danger. We offer protection in exchange for cooperation." At first, no one laughed. The tone felt too real, too steady. Scientists scrambled for answers. Governments locked themselves in emergency meetings. The internet exploded with theories. Some thought it was a prank, others believed first contact had finally happened. Then came the message's final line: "Refusal will bring consequences." That's when the world's mood shifted from awe to mockery. Memes flooded social media within minutes. Late-night shows turned it into comedy. People joked, do they even know who they're threatening? The bravado of humanity, that fierce and foolish pride, drowned out every warning. But there were others. Quiet voices in dark rooms, watching readings spike off every instrument. Military satellites picked up strange movements near the upper atmosphere, energy waves they couldn't explain. A few scientists noticed patterns hidden inside the broadcast signal, codes not meant for human ears. When they tried to share what they'd found, their reports vanished, replaced by official statements dismissing it all as electronic interference. Still, the light stayed in the sky. It pulsed sometimes, almost like it was breathing. Then the dreams began. People across the world described the same images: giant shapes moving through clouds, whispers about the gate, and something about Earth being out of alignment. It wasn't until the second broadcast that people stopped laughing. This time there was no blue glow, no friendly voice. Just a cold distortion and a single sentence: "You have been warned." The strange thing wasn't the threat. It was the reaction. Humanity didn't cower. Instead, something ancient stirred. The planet's defenses came alive, but not in the way the visitors expected. Hidden bases powered up systems that hadn't been touched in decades. Unknown frequencies began to hum beneath the ocean floor. In cities across the world, lights flickered, and people with no military background felt something awaken deep inside them. Memories, instincts, as if they'd been waiting for this moment their entire lives. By the time the ships appeared in orbit, Earth wasn't trembling. It was ready. The message that echoed back into the void wasn't spoken by one person. It came from every channel, every radio frequency, every heartbeat synced together. "Do you even know who you're threatening?" For the first time, the light in the sky flickered. Something up there hesitated. And then, without warning, the stars themselves began to move. What happened next wasn't war. It was revelation. But before humanity could understand what was truly coming, the sky split open. The sky didn't just split, it folded like a page turning in slow motion. A dark crack appeared above the clouds, stretching from horizon to horizon, humming with low vibrations that people could feel in their bones. Power grids failed across entire continents. Airplanes froze mid-air, hovering weightless before vanishing into the crack like dust in a storm. Every living creature felt it, an unseen pulse that silenced the world for exactly 7 seconds. And then everything came back, almost like nothing had happened. But everyone knew something had changed. Governments tried to control the panic. Press conferences filled the air with calm-sounding words that fooled no one. Scientists claimed it was a spatial distortion, a natural anomaly caused by magnetic storms. Yet even they looked terrified on camera. The real experts, the ones never shown on TV, were already working underground, trying to decode the readings from the event. They found patterns that didn't match any known physics, messages embedded in the energy waves. Someone, or something, was talking back. The strange part wasn't just what appeared in the sky, it was how Earth reacted. Across the planet, old structures began to respond as if they'd been waiting for a signal. Ancient stones in forgotten deserts glowed faintly. Deep in the oceans, sonar picked up geometric echoes from the seabed. Even the moon's surface reflected strange light patterns that formed symbols visible only to certain wavelengths. Humanity had always looked outward for answers, but now it seemed the answers had been buried right here all along. Then there were the people who started hearing things. Not voices exactly, more like echoes of thoughts that weren't their own. Farmers in small villages, engineers in crowded cities, even children spoke of the same dream. Standing before an enormous gate made of light, hearing a question whispered in a language they didn't know, but somehow understood. They didn't know why, but each of them woke up with the same phrase in their mind. The keepers have returned. Military networks detected movements around the planet's orbit, but nothing solid appeared on radar. Invisible forces blocked tracking systems. Yet a few blurry satellite images leaked online. Giant silhouettes shaped like inverted pyramids floating above the upper atmosphere. The debate spread everywhere. Were they invaders, watchers, or something else entirely? But deep inside certain research facilities, the reaction wasn't fear, it was recognition. Classified archives revealed that this wasn't the first time contact had been made. It had happened before, long before recorded history, and humanity had chosen to forget. Meanwhile, the blue glow from the first message returned. Only this time, it was closer. It shimmered over cities at night, casting reflections that made the stars seem alive. People gathered in the streets, no longer laughing but unable to look away. There was beauty in it, a strange calm mixed with an instinctive dread, as if something was calling out to them. And maybe it was. Beneath the surface, deep in hidden chambers built long before modern civilization, enormous machines began to stir. Their lights came on one by one, responding to the same rhythm pulsing through the atmosphere. The world's leaders were no longer in control. The planet itself seemed to be waking up. Then came the third signal. It wasn't broadcast to the public. Only a handful of people heard it, those monitoring the frequencies from secret stations buried under mountains and oceans. The message was clear, steady, and almost sorrowful. You were not supposed to remember. Those words sent ripples of fear through every command center that received them, because if humanity wasn't supposed to remember, then what exactly had it forgotten? And above the earth, beyond the crack in the sky, the shadows began to move again, closer this time. The following days were filled with silence and confusion. The skies stayed gray even when the sun was supposed to shine, as if something above was filtering the light. The air felt heavier, charged with a strange static. People went about their lives pretending everything was normal, but every glance toward the horizon carried unease. The world's leaders gave speeches about unity and calm, but their eyes told another story, fear mixed with something else, knowledge. They knew more than they were saying. Scientists who studied the sky fracture, as it came to be called, noticed that the energy readings weren't random. The pulses came in repeating intervals, almost like a heartbeat. But whose heartbeat? When one of the lead researchers compared the rhythm to seismic patterns deep beneath the Earth's crust, she froze. The pulse wasn't coming from above. It was responding to something below. Meanwhile, around the world, strange environmental changes began to occur. Rivers shifted course overnight. Forests grew thicker in some regions, while others withered suddenly. Birds started migrating in chaotic patterns, ignoring seasons. And in the middle of it all, people began to see faint lights moving beneath the ocean's surface. Huge formations of glowing shapes rising and sinking like something breathing down there. Satellite footage confirmed it. The ocean floor was moving. Amid all this, a small team of independent scientists and journalists formed a group to find the truth. They called themselves the Resonance. Working out of a hidden lab in the Andes, they intercepted fragments of the alien transmissions. One of them, an older radio technician, managed to decode a section of the second signal. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, directed not at humans, but at the planet itself. The message spoke of an ancient agreement, a balance between the keepers and the bound ones. None of them knew what those terms meant, but one phrase repeated over and over: the seal weakens. At the same time, military powers prepared for the worst. Massive defense satellites went online, and fleets were moved into position, though no one could define what they were preparing to fight. But something strange happened within those command centers. Systems began to fail, not from hacking, but as if the Earth itself was rejecting the weapons. Launch codes vanished. Target locks refused to engage. Some machines even powered down the moment they aimed skyward, as if a force larger than human control had intervened. In the streets, ordinary people started to sense something too. Some described feeling connected, like invisible threads linking their thoughts to others around the world. Random strangers reported hearing the same low hum when they closed their eyes, as though the planet was trying to speak through them. Fear turned into a quiet realization. Maybe this wasn't an invasion. Maybe it was a reminder. The resonance finally pieced together fragments of an old legend that appeared across multiple cultures, stories of a time when Earth had guardians not from above, but within. The keepers weren't aliens. They were protectors, bound to the planet long before humans existed. And the fracture in the sky wasn't an attack. It was a signal, a call for something buried deep inside Earth to awaken. But if the keepers were returning, who were the bound ones? And why had humanity been made to forget them? As another pulse rolled through the atmosphere, every screen on the planet flickered once more. The image that appeared wasn't of light this time. It was of eyes. Countless eyes staring down, ancient and knowing, as a deep voice spoke only two words. They remember. And then all communication went dark. The night the eyes appeared in the sky, every corner of the world felt it. Animals cried out, buildings shook, and even the air seemed to tremble. Then came the silence, a deep, endless quiet that made cities feel hollow. Lights flickered, power grids collapsed again, and the stars above began to shift unnaturally, forming patterns that no one could explain. Astronomers watched helplessly as constellations rearranged themselves, glowing in a sequence that repeated every hour. The world wasn't looking at the stars anymore. The stars were looking back. In underground labs, members of the Resonance worked without rest. Their latest findings were terrifying. The energy readings from beneath the Earth had grown stronger, so strong that they were now affecting magnetic fields, weather, and even time measurements. Clocks in different regions no longer matched. Some ran faster, others slower, as though reality itself was bending. The leader of the group, a quiet geologist with shaking hands, pointed to the data on her screen and whispered, "Something under us is waking up, waking." Satellite imaging showed enormous circular patterns emerging across the continents, faint outlines only visible through thermal scans. The designs matched ancient carvings found in ruins that had no connection to each other. Cultures separated by oceans had drawn the same shapes thousands of years apart. That couldn't be coincidence. Each circle, when mapped together, formed a massive symbol that covered the entire planet, with one point located exactly where the sky had fractured. The Earth wasn't reacting randomly, it was aligning. At the same time, strange sounds began echoing from deep within the oceans. Submarines sent to investigate never returned, but their last transmissions caught rhythmic tones, like a song made of thunder and static. It wasn't mechanical, it felt alive. Those sounds spread through the water, through the ground, through the air, until people could hear them faintly wherever they stood, like a heartbeat growing louder. Meanwhile, the world's militaries were on the edge of chaos. Communication systems failed one after another, leaving nations blind. Panic spread through cities as the ground began to hum, making everything vibrate. People saw visions, flashes of tall structures made of light, giant figures walking among glowing forests, and a time when humans weren't alone on the planet. The visions came and went like memories that didn't belong to them. It was as if the Earth was trying to remind its children who they truly were. The resonance realized too late that the keepers weren't returning. They were already here, bound within the planet itself, waiting for the fracture to release them. And the bound ones, the force they had been keeping sealed, was now stirring too. The ancient balance was breaking. Around the globe, earthquakes struck in perfect synchronization. From space, the entire planet seemed to shimmer, wrapped in a faint energy field. Cameras captured massive shadows moving beneath the clouds, shapes that defied explanation, too large to be ships, too alive to be machines. People stood outside in awe and fear as streaks of light fell from the sky, not like meteors, but like sparks reconnecting something long lost. In that moment, humanity understood that this wasn't just about survival. It was about remembrance. The keepers hadn't come to protect Earth from something outside. They had come to protect it from something buried deep within. The sky pulsed once, blinding white, and the sound stopped. Every person, everywhere, held their breath as a single voice, deep and resonant, echoed across the world, not from the sky, but from the ground itself. It begins now. And as the light swallowed the horizon, the fracture widened, revealing what had been hiding behind it all along. The light that poured through the fracture wasn't just bright, it was alive. It moved like liquid, flowing across the sky, bending around the planet as if searching for something. For a few seconds it was beautiful. Then everything changed. The glow shifted from white to gold, then to a deep crimson. The pulse that had been steady for days suddenly accelerated, shaking the ground harder than any earthquake ever recorded. Oceans roared, winds tore through cities, and the air itself buzzed with invisible energy. The resonance team watched in horror as their instruments overloaded one by one. The readings made no sense. The frequency of the energy had doubled, then tripled, like two separate forces were clashing. "It's not just the keepers," one of them whispered. Something else came through. Outside, the crimson light gathered in the sky, taking shape. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even solid. It looked like a massive storm made of shadow and lightning, stretching from one horizon to the other. The bound ones, the ancient force sealed beneath the planet, had awakened. But instead of emerging from below, it was being drawn down from the fracture above. The balance that had held for eons was tearing apart. Around the world, people fell to their knees, overcome by visions that weren't their own. They saw memories of an ancient war, one fought long before humans walked the earth. The keepers were guardians, but they hadn't created life. They had protected it from what the bound ones sought to consume. The agreement spoken of in the transmissions wasn't peace. It was a warning written into the fabric of the planet itself. Humanity had been shielded by forgetting. Remembering was the trigger. Governments scrambled to restore communication, but satellites were dropping out of orbit, burned by surges of unknown energy. In a desperate move, world leaders sent emergency broadcasts over analog radio, the only system still working. Their message was simple: "Stay inside, don't look at the sky." But it was too late. The light wasn't just above, it was within. Electronic devices began to pick up whispers, not from static, but from voices speaking in perfect unison. "The seal is broken. The choice is yours." Back in the Andes, the resonance uncovered something buried beneath their lab, an ancient chamber carved into the rock, older than any known civilization. At its center stood a circular gate covered in markings identical to those glowing across the Earth. It was a part of the network, a node of the planetary system that the keepers had built. When the team activated a single touchpad, the air turned cold and the gate began to hum. One of them stepped forward, realizing too late that it wasn't a machine, it was alive. The markings shifted like veins, and the entire mountain began to vibrate. Outside, the crimson clouds split open, revealing enormous figures moving behind them, silhouettes of something vast, older than the stars themselves. Yet before the bound ones could fully emerge, the planet reacted. The oceans rose, lightning struck in perfect rhythm, and the continents seemed to pulse in defiance. Earth itself was fighting back. But then came the second shock, the twist no one expected. The resonance received one final decoded message from the first transmission, hidden deep in its original signal. It wasn't from the keepers or the bound ones. It was from humans, thousands of years older than recorded history. The voice was calm, almost sorrowful. We sent the warning, we built the keepers, and now we're coming home. The sky burned brighter than ever as something new, something unmistakably human, began to emerge from the fracture. The world held its breath as the fracture widened one last time, its glow changing from crimson to a brilliant white that painted the entire sky. Every shadow vanished. The storm froze mid-air, lightning hung still, and for the first time since the chaos began, there was silence. Absolute, fragile silence. From that blinding light came shapes, human shapes, walking through as though stepping across time itself. They were not alien, not divine, but unmistakably human, yet different. Taller, calmer, their skin faintly illuminated, their eyes filled with something ancient. The resonance watched through cracked windows, unable to speak. Humanity hadn't been invaded. It had been found. The new arrivals spread across the skies like beams of light, communicating through the pulse that connected every living thing. Their voices echoed not in the air, but inside the minds of everyone on Earth. "We are your beginning," they said, "and you are our return." The truth struck hard. These weren't visitors. They were the first humans, the originators who had left millennia ago, traveling beyond the stars to protect life while the keepers guarded the planet in their absence. The keepers had been their creation, their promise to return when the balance was threatened. But the bound ones, the force of destruction once imprisoned deep beneath the earth, had grown restless during that long absence. The fracture wasn't an invasion. It was the escape route of a power that had waited too long in silence. Now, with both sides awake, the earth stood on the edge of becoming either reborn or destroyed. The ground trembled as the crimson storm fought against the returning human's light. Oceans rose high enough to touch the clouds. The planet's pulse reached a rhythm so fast it felt like the heartbeat of a dying giant. In the Andes, the resonance stood around the gate, realizing it was the final control point. They could seal the fracture, but it would mean cutting off the connection to the ancestors forever. One of them, her face streaked with tears, placed her hand on the glowing gate. "If we don't close it, nothing survives," she whispered. The others hesitated. Then, as the sky cracked open wider and the bound ones began to spill through, vast, formless energy swallowing the horizon, she activated the seal. The effect was instant. A wave of blinding light swept across the planet, erasing the crimson storm in seconds. The ground stopped shaking. The skies cleared. Every piece of technology flickered back to life. The resonance collapsed as the gate cooled, its hum fading into stillness. Humanity was safe. But then, something no one expected happened. A faint whisper echoed again, carried through every frequency, through every radio, every heartbeat. It was the voice of the woman who had activated the gate. "We didn't seal them out," she said. "We sealed ourselves in." In the following moments, the stars above flickered and rearranged once more. The fracture was gone, but a new constellation glowed where it had been. A circle, surrounding a single point of light pulsing gently, like an eye half open. The voice of the ancient humans spoke one final time, calm and distant. The Earth remembers now, and so will you. Then, as dawn broke across the silent planet, everyone looked up and realized the stars were no longer where they used to be. The Earth had moved. When the light finally faded and the stars settled into their new pattern, the world stood still. People came out of their homes slowly, stepping into streets washed in soft golden light. The sky looked different now, clearer, brighter, as though something heavy had been lifted. The air felt charged but peaceful, like the calm that comes after a long storm. For the first time in weeks, there were no tremors, no strange sounds, no fear. Only silence, and a sense that something deep within the earth had changed forever. The resonance team was found days later in the Andes, alive but exhausted. Their equipment was gone, the gate sealed beneath stone and dust. They spoke little about what they had seen, only that it worked. The world's leaders reached out to them, desperate for answers, but there were few to give. Whatever had happened, it wasn't just a scientific event. It was something far greater. The fractures in the sky had vanished, but so had many of the satellites that once circled Earth. The planet's magnetic field was stronger than ever, almost as if it had repaired itself. In the following weeks, people began to notice small miracles. Rivers that had dried up started to flow again. Forests regrew in places that had been barren for decades. Even the air seemed cleaner, sharper. Animals behaved differently too, migrating in synchronized patterns that scientists couldn't explain. It was as if the planet had rebooted itself, returning to a natural rhythm that humans had forgotten. But there were stranger signs too. Across the world, people began dreaming the same dream. They stood on a quiet shore beneath new constellations, and in the distance, they heard the same voice, the calm, familiar tone of the ancient humans who had come through the fracture. The message was simple. The Earth remembers. Now you must protect what remains. Historians and researchers started uncovering ancient texts, carvings, and fragments that suddenly made sense. Myths, once dismissed as fantasy, began to line up with scientific discoveries. Humanity's past wasn't just a story of evolution, it was a cycle of guardianship, a repeating pattern of forgetting and remembering. The keepers, the bound ones, the ancestors, all parts of the same balance that had held the planet together since before history began. The resonance disbanded quietly, scattering across the globe to live ordinary lives, but they carried a silent understanding. What they had awakened could never truly be undone. The Earth was alive, aware, and now connected again to the people who walked upon it. They had seen what lay beyond the stars and what slept beneath their feet, and realized that both were part of the same story. Years later, the world looked up at the new constellation and called it the Circle of Memory. It became a symbol of unity, a reminder that protection and destruction are two sides of the same force. Humanity had laughed once, mocking the warning of distant voices, but now it understood. The greatest power wasn't in weapons or technology, but in remembering who they were and what the planet truly was. And sometimes, late at night, when the sky was clear and the stars pulsed gently in their new pattern, people swore they could still hear that faint heartbeat beneath the ground, steady, calm, alive. The Earth was awake again, and this time it wasn't waiting for protection. It was watching. In the days that followed the Great Shift, the world learned how to breathe again. The air smelled cleaner, the winds softer, and even the sunlight felt different. Warmer, almost gentle. People spoke in hushed voices about what they had witnessed, unsure whether to call it a miracle or a reckoning. Governments tried to explain it away with science, but no one fully believed the reports. Everyone had seen the same thing, felt the same pulse, and deep down, they knew it wasn't something that could be measured or contained. The resonance team stayed in the mountains for weeks, helping to rebuild the nearby villages damaged by the tremors. They didn't talk about the gate or the message anymore. Some things, they decided, weren't meant to be analyzed. The leader of the group kept a small stone from the site, a fragment that still glowed faintly when held close to the skin. She said it was a reminder, proof that what they'd experienced was real. But she also feared what it meant. If humanity had once built the keepers, then it carried both the gift and the burden of that power. As time passed, the world adjusted to its new rhythm. Technology began to fail in small, curious ways. Machines that relied on precision started to drift, as if the planet's pulse no longer matched their logic. But in return, natural systems began to thrive. Crops grew faster. Rain patterns became predictable again. Species once thought extinct started reappearing in remote places. Scientists were baffled, but ordinary people saw it for what it was: Earth healing itself. The new constellation became a symbol of unity. Every culture gave it a name. Some called it the Circle of Return, others the Eye of the Earth. Festivals were held in its honor, celebrating the night humanity remembered its place in the story of the planet. For the first time in generations, nations worked together to protect the environment, not out of fear, but out of understanding. The event that had nearly destroyed them had also awakened something far more powerful: empathy. Yet, even in peace, mysteries remained. Some people still heard faint echoes when they closed their eyes, whispers in a language older than words. Others claimed to see fleeting figures of light at dawn or felt the ground hum beneath their feet. The residents believed the keepers hadn't left. They were still here, woven into the fabric of the world, watching quietly, ensuring balance. One evening, years after the fracture closed, the team gathered again in the Andes, now home to a quiet research center. They watched the stars and listened to the wind. The youngest member asked softly, "Do you think they'll ever come back?" The leader smiled faintly. "They never left," she said. "They just reminded us how to listen." As night deepened, the Earth's pulse resonated faintly through the ground, steady and calm. Humanity had survived not because of strength or defiance, but because it finally remembered what it had forgotten: that the planet had always been alive, patient, and waiting. The stars shimmered in their new pattern, the circle glowing brighter than ever, and the world below whispered in unison, grateful, awakened, and finally at peace.